And good evening, basketball fans, and welcome to the Upstate Hoops podcast on FingerLakes1.com and FingerLakes1.tv. I'm Jim Sinacropi, flying solo tonight with my co-host Matt Berkey at a Christmas party. But plenty to talk about. We'll recap a winter storm shortened week of action in the Wayne Finger Lakes leagues, and then a special guest, the voice of Finger Lakes Radio Sports, Ted Baker, will call in for the first installment of a new weekly segment, Radio Roundball Roundup, that we're excited about. I'll give you our players of the week, and then stay tuned as we release the latest edition of our FL1 Sports Wayne Finger Lakes Basketball Power Rankings. The Upstate Hoops podcast is brought to you by locations in Auburn, Farmington, Geneva, Phelps, Seneca Falls, Union Springs, and Waterloo. Check out their mobile banking app and visit them online at mygenbank.com. And by Dr. Rod Littlejohn, with over 30 years of smiles with style. And by Red's Place, those best lunches in town are in downtown Seneca Falls. Check out their menu at men'shalloffame.com. All right, I'm really excited tonight to announce a new segment for the podcast. Every week, opening the show, we'll do the Radio Roundball Roundup with Ted Baker of Finger Lakes News Radio Sports. And you know, when you're trying to cover the action across the vast landscape of Wayne Finger Lakes basketball, it's impossible to get all the games to get a proper overview of all the teams and evaluate the players, because it's hard to get out to all the gyms. So, you know, we rely on conversations with coaches, box scores, and one of the greatest resources and pleasures as a local basketball fan is to listen to Ted Baker call games, usually several games a week, you know, from a wide variety of gymnasiums across the league. So now Upstate Hoops podcast viewers and listeners will be able to benefit from Ted's hard work and insights, as we'll be catching up with him during the first 5-10 minutes of every show. And so tonight, flying solo, I've convinced Ted to maybe hang out a little bit longer, and we can talk hoops for you tonight. So without further ado, let me welcome Ted to the show. How you doing, Ted?
Good. Great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting to, as I said, you know, I think the better we can all get a handle on the landscape of Wayne Finger Lakes basketball, the more interesting product it becomes. And I love the opportunity to listen in live to games across the area that, you know, I wouldn't be able to go to normally. So, you know, we appreciate everything you guys do. And it's not only you. There's games on WFLR from the western portion. You guys cover Canandaigua and in Auburn in some Section 3 basketball. So it's a great resource, and I think can kind of combine with what we're trying to do here on this podcast, and you know, just general coverage of the media in general, that this local high school basketball is just a great product if you're willing to spend the time to pay attention.
Yeah, it's interesting because things change so quickly. I mean, you have the Waterloo girls program that was real strong, but then they lost two very good players in Lauren Deming and Lindsey Johnson. You got the Geneva boys, who have been a powerhouse, but they just graduated everybody last year, so they're kind of starting over brand new. So things turn over. It isn't, you know, nobody seems to stay at the top for any length of time, and that makes for some exciting basketball.
And unlike college, the players have to stay there for 4 years. So while Waterloo did experience quite a big drop-off, we just got off of watching Lauren Deming and Lindsey Johnson play for 3 years on varsity. And, you know, there's a ton of great sophomores on the boys' side this year, and it's nice to know that, you know, we're going to get to know them and see them develop from sophomores to seniors for 3 years without, you know, they can't go to college early. And that's one of the things with college basketball right now that I'm kind of, you know, it kind of turns you off when the guys come in and out so fast and onto the NBA, which I'm not a big NBA fan. So, you know, I find that the local high school scene is really engaging, because you get to, you know, develop an appreciation and watch the growth of some of these players over time.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how players develop over their careers. You know, some people have a lot of raw talent and never really figure out how to harness it, and then other people do and turn into stars. I mean, there's some that you can kind of see coming. You see a kid come in as a freshman and say, you know, he or she's going to be a star, and then there's some that kind of come out of nowhere and take a bigger role when other players graduate. So it's interesting to watch that development.
Yeah, it sure is. And also trying to figure out, who's got the good teams from year to year. And we both saw Minders play this week. I listened to you call the Minders Geneva game, which was a really close game, and then Friday night in Seneca Falls, Waterloo played Minders, and Minders had a 16-point lead at one point, ended up winning by 4 after Waterloo, I think, pulled to within 1. And it's tough to get a feel of this Minders team. I also saw Newark handle Livonia fairly easily in Victor, and they come out and double up Geneva on Friday night. And so I guess when evaluating a team like Minders, it's tough to tell if they have what it takes to maybe hang with Newark or Pelmac atop the Finger Lakes East this year. So, what's your general impressions of the Blue Devils after watching them beat Geneva?
Well, they played a solid game. It was a game of runs that went back and forth. The thing about Minders is they're so reliant on the three-point shot, and there's not a lot of consistency. I mean, they're going to have nights where they go, 10 for 16 and bury somebody, and then they're going to have nights where they go 3 for 16 and struggle. So you live by the 3, die by the 3, and that's, you can look at the box score, and if they won by 20 points, you're going to figure they probably hit 8 or 9 threes, and if they lose, they only hit 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's a good point. And they didn't necessarily light it up from 3 against Geneva, but they still found a way to win down the stretch. Maybe Geneva helped them out with that Marquand Ross technical. What happened there? That was a pretty key point in the game.
Yeah, I didn't see exactly what happened. He must have said something, that there was a call that he didn't like or something. But also, the Minders backcourt, they handle the ball pretty well. They didn't fold under pressure. Geneva put a lot of pressure defense at them. Changed up their defenses a lot. So it's not just a three-point team. Obviously, that's a big part of their attack, but they look pretty solid. And Geneva just is going to have to develop because they lost about their top 6 or 7 players from last year's team. Before the game, I always go downstairs to get the lineups, and first thing Coach said to me, he said, "This is not your usual Geneva." So right off the bat, I mean, he's Brian Miller's got quite a rebuilding job to do, and I think they lost 3 games last year, and they've already lost 3 or 4 this year.
Yeah, and Brian Miller actually told me a pretty interesting stat. They had about 1,600 points they scored last year in their sectional championship season. And of that's those 1,600 points, there's only 48 left on the roster. So of the guys on the roster, only 48 points last year, which is amazing. And but it's a cyclical nature of things, and I think Coach Miller's been a little spoiled since he came to Geneva. He had Sweeney and Donahue a couple of years ago, and last year Junior Sims coming over for DeSales and Terrell Johnson, and after watching Geneva play against Wilson and Victor 2 weeks ago. They have the athletic ability. I just think they need to kind of learn to play in Coach Miller's system, and that could be it could take a little while, but you can see the potential there. So
I think it will, but I think he's an excellent coach, and he really stresses defense. So I think they'll come along. The other thing, for whatever reason, over the years, Geneva just never seems to shoot free throws well. I mean, I saw one of their box scores recently. There was something like 3 for 9. I know that's hurt them in some playoff games in the past. So kind of a lot of those fundamental things. They've just got to make sure to take care of the basketball. They've got to hit some free throws. You got to keep your head about it. Like you talked about that technical foul. Marquand Ross fouled out of the game, and they really could have used him down at the end.
Yeah, and that's also an interesting thing about watching, the play at this level is, sometimes if you can just keep a cool head, play under control, and make fundamentally sound decisions, you're going to have a good season. And I think that's kind of one reason why Newark's set up for success this year, because Tyler Collins does all those things. He against Livonia and Victor, he played one-on-one with a kid named Ricky Allen, who's a really good shooter and point guard from Livonia, and he had his way. Almost had a triple-double, 26 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. And I actually have a little highlight package I'm going to play near the end of the show, so some of our viewers who may have never seen Tyler play can just get a look at what I'm talking about. But, good senior leadership like that, which going back to Minders, they have a kid, Liam Caraher, who's been mostly a shooter, through his first 2 years on varsity, and now is being kind of asked to be a leader. And so far, he's been a leader, and he made the big play down the stretch in Geneva.
Yeah, he looked good, and it really looked to me like in that Geneva game, they weren't looking for the three-point shot. We talked earlier about how reliant they are on the three, but they really weren't looking for it against Geneva. But yeah, I thought Carraher looked good. I mean, there's always seemed like there's always going to be a good Furky on the Minders team.
Yeah,
and they look pretty solid. I think they're going to do well this year.
Yeah, Verke as a sophomore, which again we're going to see him develop. He looks like he could develop a little more physically, get a little stronger. But against Waterloo on Friday night, there was 59 fouls called in that game, and so one thing we got to see a lot of bench players from Minders. But Devin Verke went to the line 16 times and made 15 free throws. And in a 4-point game, I think that there's your MVP, 15 to 16 from the free throw line. So he's a good one for sure, and nobody gets their shot off quicker than Devin Verke.
You brought up another very good point, which is probably a little more so on the boys' side, but that's the physical development. You see that kid that as a freshman or a sophomore, he's maybe 6 feet, 6'1", and kind of skinny, and then all of a sudden over the summer one year he shows up the next year and he's 6'4" and 225 and a whole different player. Yeah,
and a kid that kind of fits that bill would be Ben Deming for Waterloo.
Yeah.
He is, I heard things over the summer about how he was dominating the summer leagues, and he came out and looks great. He against Minders. Now, there's two sides to the story with Ben. The talent is almost limitless. Literally, I think he should be the best player in the league. He's got the physical traits. He can hit any shot within 16 feet with ease, hits the boards hard. But on the other side of things, in a tight game against Minders, in the second quarter, he picked up his second foul, didn't like the call, kind of drop-kicked the mat under the basket and got a technical, which was his third foul. And so out of the game he came, and we didn't see him again until the third quarter. And then when he did come back in the second half, Waterloo started climbing back and cutting into that lead before he eventually fouled out. So just a junior, but he's I want to call him the best player in the Wayne Finger Lakes leagues, because I think that he should be. He just needs to mature a little bit more, and I think he'll get there. But I don't know when you're going to get a chance to see Deming, but he's something else.
Yeah, we had one of their games earlier. The thing that over the last couple of years, to me, that's really hurt Waterloo is just poor offensive execution and a lot of poor shot selection. I mean, there are times that you see a shot go up and just right out of the hand, you know that it has no chance to go in. But again, I think Jeff Panic is a very good coach. I mean, he had some great seasons at Mid Lakes and then moved over to Geneva. Had a lot of talent when he was at Geneva, but I think he's going to get them playing better. And one of the things, when you talk about somebody like Deming, is you have to understand how post play is. You're going to get held, you're going to get banged on, and you're not going to get every foul called against the other guy. And so it takes some guys a little bit of time to get used to that, to realize that there's some give and take. You can bang your body around a little bit and get away with it, and your opponent's going to do it to you a little bit and get away with it.
Yeah, and that, like you say, that's something you learn as you get a little older, and sometimes you learn that into college too. I just watched Syracuse beat Louisiana Tech earlier tonight, and they had two guys in foul trouble, and one of them was Raheem Christmas, the senior leader of the team, who still as a senior can't learn to not pick up those dumb fouls early, and it happened again tonight. So it's something that you kind of mature into. But speaking of Syracuse, I find it hard to believe that they can't make 3-point shots when I watch Minders play South Seneca and some of these other teams. I watched Holden North for Pelmac make 7. I watched Ricky Allen, the kid that Tyler Collins played, he made 5 in that game. So we're seeing all these high school kids drain threes. Why can't the Cuse make some?
Yeah, it's funny. There's no GMAC type shooter that can be consistent. That's what you look for, I think, a little more at the college level, is consistency. Like I talked about Minders earlier, where you'll go 10 for 15 from 3 and then 2 for 15. I mean, at the college level, you look for a little bit more consistency than that.
Right. So, and that's another thing that I think makes Tyler Collins at Newark so special, is that he seems to be very consistent, and he's 18 years old. Can't say enough about Newark. They're my pick, Ted, for the Finger Lakes East this year. I don't know if you have any other opinions or if you agree.
Well, it's funny. One thing, I don't get to see as much of Newark because generally when we put matchups together, I mean, we try to find two teams from inside our listening area. I mean, Wayne County is kind of a secondary listening area for us, so I'm more likely to have a Geneva-Waterloo matchup. But we'll usually get a couple of Newark games in. And the other thing is with the weather this year, it's been an odd start to the season. I mean, I'm calling the Geneva girls game tomorrow night, and they've played one game coming into December 15th with only one game played this year. It's been kind of a slow start to the season with all the weather issues.
Yeah, and then you got a couple other teams like Marcus Whitman, I think, is 4-0, and HAC's 4-0, and so yeah. But there are some teams. Clyde Savannah's a team that's 1-0. They beat Williamson the other night. By
the way, I've seen that Marcus Whitman team a couple of times, and I know I'm sitting about a mile from the high school as we speak, so they're my home guys. But that team has surprised me with how good they are because they lost pretty much all their starters from last year. But one of the things that they do is they play a very up-tempo style, so they go deep on the bench. So the guys that are stepping up this year, even though they didn't start last year, saw some playing time. That team's got some pretty good talent. I think they're going to have a good season.
Yeah, and it's always tough to get a finger on the West. It seems like it changes kind of drastically. As a matter of fact, this week Naples beat Dundee. I was thinking Dundee, after beating Bloomfield, was going to be odds-on favorite to maybe run away in the Finger Lakes West, and then they lost to Naples. I think Coach Miller had a couple starters that were out, but nonetheless, one of the reasons we were thinking so highly of Naples is because, of Dundee, is because they were deep in physical team, and so that was a little shocking. So you never really know what's going to happen out there in the West. It seems like it was Honeoye and Bloomfield for years. And then after the hazing incident in Honeoye, they've kind of fallen off the map, and it's really up for grabs in the West. Who do you like in the Finger Lakes West? Is it Marcus Whitman?
Well, they're the only one I think I've seen so far, and we tend to do a little bit more of the games in the East, so I pay a little more attention to the East. But from what I've seen, we've done two of the Whitman games, and they've got a kid in the low post named Brad Stone who's 6'5", and it's funny. We were talking earlier about the development of a post player, and talking to his coach, he played AAU ball over the summer, and he said, the first game out, the guy that was guarding him fouled him hard, and there was no whistle, and he's looking around for the whistle, and coach said, get used to it. This is what you're going to have to do to develop as a post player. But and it's funny because I coached him when he was about 4'5" in baseball in fourth grade, so he's developed, and that up-tempo style they play, they really get up and down the floor, and they get a lot of easy baskets in transition, and it's a style that suits them well. So, again, I'll have kind of better opinions as the season goes along. It's just the way the season has started and all the cancellations. I've seen a lot fewer of the teams than I normally would have at this time of the year.
Yeah, I think normally on this segment we'll be talking about 3 or 4 games that you may have done in a given week. Let's just real quick before I let you go, move over to the girls' side of things. You got a big game on the schedule this week that you're calling South Seneca. Is it at Romulus or is it down in the Guinan?
That's at South Seneca on Friday night.
Now, that as far as girls basketball in this area goes, that is like the Duke Carolina matchup. Romulus, of course, coming off the state championship, they lost a lot, but they still have Zoe McDonald. And then South Seneca's just seem to get better and better every year, and I think a lot of people down in Ovid are wondering if this is the year that maybe they make a run similar to Romulus. So it's all coming to a head on Friday night, and what do you think?
I've seen the South Seneca girls once. They're not a very deep team, and that sometimes trips up. You see that on the girls' side a little bit more, where you've got a team that only has 1 or 2 scorers. They lost a couple of good players. Romulus is very well coached. That's going to be a fun game because it's just I love those in-county, Seneca County matchups because the schools are all so close together and everybody kind of knows each other, and it's like you said, like Duke Carolina or one of those old Syracuse Big East rivalry games. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, they certainly know each other in Ovid or South Seneca and Romulus. There's a little bit of a backstory every time those two teams meet. And head coach Dan Lent of South Seneca's boys varsity up here in the studio last week, and he talked about how much the merger really hurt what they were trying to do in South Seneca. They merged the basketball team for one season, very
Yeah.
unsuccessful year, and then he almost has to start back over again. And but yeah, not the case on the girls' side. Both those programs they didn't merge, and they both flourished, during that same time span. So, hopefully Coach Lent can get the Falcons back in gear, and they had a nice win this week. Oh, geez, I'm drawing a blank. They beat Honeoye pretty handily by 12 points. So nice to see them get on the board. They're 1-2 now on the season. Now staying with the girls, Ashley Vanderwall at Pell Mac. Have you had a chance to call many of her games last year?
We did. We had a couple last year. I mean, she's terrific, and then they had, and I don't have the names right off the top of my head, but I remember they had two just excellent freshman players last year that I said, wow, these girls are going to be around for a long time. It just seems like that team is always strong. They're the kind of the exception to what we were talking about the up and down cycles. There's a couple of programs that just manage to always stay pretty good, and the Palmac girls seem to be one of them.
Yeah, and watching Minders last Friday night defeating Waterloo pretty handily, that had to feel good for them. They have we tried to figure out the last time the Minders girls beat the Waterloo girls, and it's been a good 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 games since they've done it. But they won last night, and they looked really good. They're really deep. They have a nice blend of experience and youth. Their best player might be freshman Heidi Miller, and they're well coached. Jerry Anderson is a very good coach. So talking to Jerry after the game, about now, is this team ready to compete with the Pell Macs of the world? And I guess we'll find out in the Genevas too. Now, talk a little bit about the Geneva girls.
Yeah, well, first, what I want to say about Minders is that they really benefit by being a Class C team playing in the Finger Lakes East. I mean, when they come to playoff time, their first couple of round playoff games are easier than most of what they have in the regular season because they have to go up against the Genevas and the Palmacs and the Newarks, and that's, we've seen these miracle runs the last 2 years where everybody writes them off 3 or 4 wins in the regular season, but then they get in against that Class C playoff bracket, and they do very well. Geneva's got almost everybody back, and, they've got to have, at this point, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after the way they've exited the playoffs over the last few years. I mean, it's just the most agonizing losses. I mean, last year against Wayne, they're 2 points up with 11 seconds to go. Wayne scores, ties the game, steals the inbounds pass, scores the winning bucket with 0.7 of a second left to go. So, and Ed Collins Jr. is another very good coach. Really teaches pressure defense. So I think that Geneva team is going to be very, very strong this year. And for Waterloo, it's always interesting to see how players adapt to a changing role. You have Chelsea Steinruck, who's a great player for Waterloo, but now she's the first scoring option, and that's a little different than when you're the third scoring option. I mean, she's a great defender and a great scorer, but when you're Waterloo last year, when it comes down to crunch time, you just give the ball to Lauren Deming, get out of the way, or throw it in the low post to Johnson, and they don't have that anymore. And how they kind of cope with that and learn to accept greater roles is going to have a lot to do with how they do this year, I think.
And that's kind of what Minders did. They focused on Chelsea Steinruck, frustrated her, and forced them to get points elsewhere. And really the only place they were getting it was from a freshman named Tammy Castiglione.
Yeah, she looked pretty good.
Yeah, she had a nice game. So, real interesting season in the girls and in the boys. And Ted, I'm looking forward to, like I said, first right off the bat, opening up every week. We're gonna just have a quick 5-minute chat, get caught up on the games you saw, kind of talk about it a little bit, and I think it'll really help all our listeners, get a better handle on things. And I think that's why people watch this show, is because they're trying to understand the leagues as a whole. Before I let you go, where are you going to be this week?
We've got tomorrow night, I'll be in Geneva for the Waterloo Geneva girls. I actually have hockey on Tuesday night. Geneva Hockey's hosting Geneseo. They have their Dico D'Amico tournament that they do every year right before Christmas. So we've got that game on Tuesday. Geneva Hockey with Rush Henrietta on Thursday. And then Friday, it's the South County Showdown. We got the Romulus girls in South Seneca on WGVA. And then we also have Auburn coverage and Wheat Sport on WAUB. We cover Canandaigua on K1045. If you go to our website, fingerlakesdailynews.com, there's a rotator at the bottom of the page that'll always show you the up-to-date schedule.
And you can stream any of these games. I mean, I listened to that Minders Geneva game on TuneIn Radio because, I was actually in my basement. It was at night, and so, I popped open the TuneIn app, and, it's perfect reception. I mean, crystal clear.
The streaming is nice. We get a lot of comments from distant relatives, a lot of aunts and uncles and grandparents that live away from the Finger Lakes are able to listen to the games that way.
Yeah, that is nice, and it's nice to know that those folks are tuning in when you're calling the game. So, again, Ted, thanks again for taking the time out, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to it. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, Ted, good night.
All right.
And there you have it, Ted Baker. He's actually the program director at Finger Lakes Radio Group, but he's also a great play-by-play guy. I love listening to games that Ted calls. And the first one of the year that I heard was Minders Geneva, and I'm going to try to listen into that South Seneca Romulus game, and the Geneva game too, which was, I think he said, Monday night. So moving on here in the show, even though I'm up here lonely by myself without Verk, he's at a Christmas party, which that'll happen these times of year, this time of year, Christmas parties. But he did give me his player of the week this week, and it's important to know that the Upstate Hoops player of the week needs to email upstatehoops@fingerlakes1.com, and we'll send you a t-shirt. You need to send us your t-shirt size and your mailing address. So this week's players of the week, Vert took Matt Spur of Williamson. He had 29 points in a 60-38 win over Marion on Friday night, 17 in a loss to Clyde Savannah. But nice output by Matt Spur of Williamson. He's one player of the week. And then, hey, guess who's my player of the week? He's a guy that had won it multiple times last year, and I have a feeling this won't be the last time he wins it this year. Jake Slobe of Red Creek with 34 points in a 71-49 win over Sodas on Tuesday, and then he had 25 points, 8 rebounds versus ER in a 67-46 win. Those are typical Jake Slobe numbers. But more impressed, the fact that Red Creek won these two games by such a wide margin. And, this is Slobe's senior campaign, and these are two teams that we were thinking are going to be in the mix in Wayne County with Ron Derek Morris transferring to Sodas. But Red Creek handled them. Going into the year, we were kind of talking about Red Creek maybe Jake Slobe's going to score points and everything, but hey, they're not going to compete for the title in Wayne County. But we might be wrong. Right now they're standing at 2-0, first place, along with Lions and others. But there's our players of the week. Congratulations, Matt Spur and Jake Slobe. Jake, you might have to create your own drawer for your t-shirts. But hey, send us the email. We'll get you one out. Or we could maybe give it to you in person on Saturday night, because Finger Lakes One Sports is going to be in Clyde on Saturday night for Red Creek versus Clyde Savannah. And so our first look at Jake Slobe on Finger Lakes One Sports. Okay, moving on. We have to release our updated Wayne Finger Lakes power rankings here on FL1 Sports. And this is always interesting this time of year. A lot of flux, I suppose, in the rankings. But here they are. The updated Wayne Finger Lakes Upstate Hoops Power Rankings. Number 10, moving into the rankings, Clyde Savannah. Perhaps we overlooked Clyde. Unranked last week. But after Mike Turner scored 23 points, and Derek Chance, a freshman point guard who everybody's high on, had 11. Jared Faniel, brother of Joe Faniel, last year's starting point guard, had 15. And Clyde handled Williams in 63-37. And, sometimes you fall into the trap when ranking these teams or evaluating them, say, oh, well, geez, Clyde lost Bogan, DeSano, Faniel. They're not going to be nearly as good as they were last year. And perhaps they're not, but they're still pretty good. Mike Turner is probably the best athlete in Wayne County, maybe in all the Wayne Finger Lakes. He's an absolute beast. So we move him up to 10, and that might be too high. But I guess we'll find out on Saturday when we get a look at them up in Clyde. Moving up on, another unranked team moving in. HAC, they're at 4-0 after Eric Tolhurst made a game-winning shot with 3 seconds left to beat Bloomfield. They're one of 3 new teams debuting in the top 10 power rankings this week after number 10 Sodus dropped out, number 9 Waterloo dropped, and number 5 Dundee dropped, all the way from 5 out. This week's rankings features 4 Finger Lakes East teams, 4 Wayne County teams, and 2 West teams. So moving on to number 8, North Rose Wolcott. They were 8 last week. They hold steady with a win over Sodus. They're 1-0. Haven't had too much of a chance to check out North Rose and their sophomore point guard Tyler Norris, but we're going to see him on December 29th in Waterloo. Up to 7, unranked, making their debut in the poll, the Red Creek Rams. 2 big wins over ER and Sodus. And it's not just Jake Slobe. Nick Klein hit 4 3-pointers in the win over ER, 20 points. Got a kid named Willie Meyer, had 12 points and 8 rebounds. So Red Creek, 2 big wins in the Wayne County, debuts at 7. And then at 6, we got a team Ted Baker was just talking about, Marcus Whitman. They were 7 last week. They moved up 1, even though they didn't play. They sit at 4-0. Number 5, Minders Academy Blue Devils up 1 from 6 to 5. And was wondering if Minders was going to move up or down. They won at Geneva, which is great. But then Geneva went and lost by 34 to Newark. And then they beat Waterloo, which was great. But Waterloo's 1-3. And they were up 16 points and only won by 4. So it's tough to get a real feel on this Minders team. But they're at 5 right now in this week's rankings. And then we move on to number 4, Palmac. They dropped from 3 to 4, even though they had a 21-point win over Mid Lakes. And we moved up from number 4 last week to number 3, Penn Yan, with a 19-point win at Waterloo. Ben Colbert had 18. Tanner Irwin had 15. They also beat Mid Lakes by 21. Colbert had 12 that game. Interesting to get a closer look at Penn Yan, because 2 impressive wins there in the East, and the real question is, okay, how will Penn Yan stack up against Minders or Newark or Geneva and or Palmac? Not going to have to wait too long to find out. Number 2 in the rankings is Lions. The Lions. They had a 10-point win over Gananda. They host Sodus, Andy, and then they're at ER next week. Talked to Coach Zach Young. He says Lions is ranked too high. He says we're not that good. We're not number 2. Need to get better. But I look at Damon Hunter. I look at that big fella Jordan Amel, and a great cast of role players and solid players on that Lions team. And we've got them still at number 2. And then number 1, as they were last week, Newark did nothing to threaten their position at number 1 after doubling up Geneva on Friday night, 68 to 34. So there you have it. The most recent Upstate Hoops Power Rankings. They'll be posted at our show website and at fingerlakes1.com. Once again, that's Clyde at 10, HAC 9, North Rose Wolcott 8, Red Creek at 7, Marcus Whitman 6, Minders 5, 4 is Palmac, 3 is Penn Yan, 2 is Lions, and Newark is 1. So as we get ready now to wrap it up, let's take a quick look at the week ahead. Monday night, you have Naples at Marcus Whitman. An interesting Finger Lakes West match. Marcus Whitman's 4-0. Naples coming off the big win against Dundee. Isaiah Tilley going to try to lead the Big Green Machine against Marcus Whitman. Then on Tuesday night, School of the Arts at Wayne, Honeoye at Minders in a crossover. Marion at Gananda, North Rose Wolcott at Williamson. And then the game of the night, in my mind, on Tuesday is Sodus at Lions. Sodus not off to the start they hoped, with a couple of losses this week to, one of them to Red Creek. And they go to Lions next. No games Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we've got South Seneca at Romulus in the West. That's a little bit of a grudge match there, a little rivalry. Got to give the edge to South Seneca as Dan Lent looks to even up his record at 2-2. and when they play Romulus. We also got Red Jacket at Whitman, HAC at Dundee, pretty big Finger Lakes West matchup. Naples at Honeoye, Gananda at North Rose Wolcott. That's a pretty good Wayne County game. Lions at East Rochester, Red Creek at Marion, and then Sodus at Clyde. And then Friday night, Mid Lakes at Wayne, Newark at Waterloo, which, geez, didn't get much easier for poor Waterloo after dropping that close one at Minders. Now they got to play Newark. At least they're hosting them on Friday night. Pelmac at Geneva. And Penn Yan at Minders may be the game of the night on Friday as we get to see, again, if Minders can answer the bell against a team that's looking to be one of the top teams in the Finger Lakes East, the Penn Yan Mustangs. And, of course, FL1 Sports will be live webcasting the Red Creek at Clyde game, originally scheduled for Tuesday of this week. It was rescheduled to Saturday the 20th. Tip time 7:30. Get to meet Jake Slobe of Red Creek. Watch live on your computer, tablet, smartphone, or television on FingerLakes1.tv via the FingerLakes1.com app or on our YouTube channel. So that about wraps it up for the show tonight. I'd like to thank Ted Baker for taking the time to join us. Matt Verke will be back next week. We'll have tons to talk about. And, of course, if you want to contact the show, Upstate Hoops at FingerLakes1.com. You can follow us on Twitter at HoopsPod. And thanks for joining us. Subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher.com. We'll be back next Sunday night at 9 o'clock. Until then, have a great week. And we'll see you live on Saturday night in Clyde.